Are we live? Oh, we're live now. Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the Knowledge Panel Show, How to Avoid Digital Marketing Burnout. Today we have a brilliant set of guests. We have Si, Caspian and Pam. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. So if Caspian, if we start with you, who are you? What do you do? Where do you work? Where are you coming to this podcast from?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Caspian. I'm a digital accessibility specialist and founder of Accessible by Design, which is a digital accessibility consultancy.
Brilliant. Si?
Hello. My name is Si. So I'm just a old school SEO. Yeah, I like data. I like spreadsheets. I like shiny objects like ChatGPT. And I work as a contractor, freelancer, and a specialist consulting businesses and agencies. You can find me at Kudu HQ. Yeah, great to be on board.
Brilliant. And Pam?
Hi, I'm Pam from Pam and Marketing and Stealth Search and Analytics. Also, I guess I would qualify as an old school SEO. Been in this world a long time now. I can't even believe how many years when you talk about how many years Google's been around. Anyway, I am coming to you from New Jersey in the US, and I'm really happy to be here. I love this topic. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Oh, thanks for coming on the show, guys. It's really great to have you on. So I guess we'll start out with the obvious question, which is what is digital marketing burnout? Um, this can be as personal as you like. Come at it from any angle. Um, Si, do you want to start?
I think just that deep breath. I think that kind of says it all. I think really what burnout is, from my perspective, and the way I look at it, is I think it happened a lot more during the pandemic, particularly not having that support group around you when you work on your own, especially when you work from home. You know, you can jump off a call, say you're working in for an agency with an agency, and it could be a really horrendous call. And what you don't get really when you're working at home, you can't just drop off the call and turn around and speak to your colleague about it, and they can say, "Hey, look, that person is being an idiot" or whatever. You're basically stuck there with your own thoughts, and that could be very difficult. And if you're going from one call to another call, and you're constantly stuck in those thoughts, whether they be negative or it's very difficult to have someone to bounce that off. And when you are working, when we have been working in the office environment, it's been just very easy where you can be with a colleague, you can strike it off and walk on. And I think that does have an impact to mental health, and it does create burnout with people that I've worked with, and also with myself as well. I've seen it a lot. I think that for me, I'll say, is probably the start of the burnout that we've seen, particularly recently.
Yeah, sort of that negative feedback loop that you just give yourself, and it's so hard to get out of it, for sure. Caspian, have you got anything to add? Or I can see you nodding away.
I'm just nodding in agreement, really. I think, to me, burnout is a feeling of exhaustion, like stress, a feeling that your workload is insurmountable, that you can't really see a way out of what you're doing. You're kind of blinkered to any solution. And you may have a feeling like you're always running from one thing to the next. You don't feel like you have the ability to plan. And I think that kind of wears down on one's self-confidence, because I'd say, largely speaking, it starts from maybe workload tipping over a point that you have the ability to then manage it. And then it's kind of self-perpetuating from there.
Yeah. It's so hard, isn't it, to stop yourself. It's almost like that point of it being too much is completely invisible, and you don't know until you're in it. It's too deep, I think, sometimes. Pam, do you have any initial thoughts on how you would describe digital marketing burnout?
Yeah, all of that absolutely resonated with me. The negative self-talk, like the first word that came to mind when I thought about this was guilt. Like, I feel guilty that I am not getting enough done, or, that I should be doing this. I heard the saying once, shooting all over yourself. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be, for everything that I do, I chastise myself for not doing 5 other things. So that's, it's like you said, a cycle. It's a never ending negative cycle. And I think another part of it is too, this culture in digital marketing that your value comes from the number of hours that you work. I don't know how that continues to spill over from like old school office culture, butts and seats culture, like the number of hours you sit at your desk, it determines your worth, not what you're actually doing and your actual value. It just, maybe that's because my work life started out in that environment. It just sticks with me. But if I actually am being extremely productive in a certain day, getting a ton done, I'm feeling good, that guilt just comes in when I'm like, I could walk away now, but I shouldn't. Should all over myself. So yeah, all of that just kind of rolls together into what I think of as digital marketing burnout.
Yeah, no, I think that makes some really good points. Just I guess to sum up that part, sort of isolation, the self-guilt, it's all coming from ourselves, it seems like. But maybe we should widen that up a little bit and say, how does it relate to the community? Because I know that we say it as it's an individual feeling and we're putting it on ourselves, but like Pam just said, there's some sort of expectations in quite a few different aspects of SEO and digital marketing, which is one, do the hours, do extra hours, push through, do this, do that. But I was wondering if you guys have noticed any other maybe patterns that bring along digital marketing burnout. One of them, I think, is that constant need for content. That just it absolutely wears me out every day, because that's such an example of I've got to push myself to write this piece of content that I don't even know where to stop or start, and if people are going to listen, and if I don't put it out there, then all of my other, my network is going to think that I'm not writing. And for some reason that has a real bearing on me, on how I approach work. So I wonder if you guys have any other patterns or resonate with that.
Yeah, I do actually, and I'm gonna take a shot at the hustle culture. I think the hustle culture, and also, as you said, like your network, or say, you go on LinkedIn or you go on Twitter and stuff like that, and everybody's always posting about the great work that they're doing, or like they're working up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're going out there, going to get it, creating all this beautiful content and stuff like that. Okay, that's fine, that works for you, but not everybody's in the same kind of boat. Not everybody mentally is at the same level as the stuff that you actually do. Not everybody wants to wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, for instance. And I think sometimes what happens, I think, within the digital industry, because it's also a bit of tech as well, is that, as you said, Pam, it's that kind of idea that you have to work hard X amount of hours, and I think it's almost that peer pressure as well. You see all your colleagues, putting in 8-hour week, as Mr. Elon would say. Is that mentally healthy for somebody? Say you're going through a family issue, is 80 hours a week even healthy for you? So I think that's it, and I think it is a sort of peer pressure, and it's always coming from your network, coming from people that you're probably following on LinkedIn and stuff like that, and that hustle mentality that I think personally is becoming a bit toxic at this moment in time, because it doesn't really consider people's current state of mind. So yeah, those are my 2 cents and 2 thoughts. But yeah, there's obviously a lot more we can go
I
into
really like that. I think it's a lot of what you said there resonates with me in terms of how I feel like my identity is warped every single time I log into a different social media platform. I go on like LinkedIn, and I have to put on this face where I woke up at the correct time this morning and I have done my work, and this is how I did it, and this is why you should all follow me. Whereas you go onto Twitter and it's all memes, and you have to portray that you're just as funny as you are clever. And then you go onto Facebook and you have to maintain this thing with your family, and also sort of mention that you work because your family need to know that for some reason. I do think that there's this idea that maybe burnout is coming from this forced identity that we're putting on ourselves a little bit. Don't know if Pam or Caspian, maybe you have something. You're nodding along. Can't be the only one then.
I was just going to say, I think it's having to be responsive all the time, and the immediacy of the internet and digital communications. Anyone working in digital has to be able to be responsive, and sometimes that's more demanding than others. But always that's gonna, unless you kind of scheduled out slots in your day to be responsive, that's always going to take you away from planned time, and that's kind of exhausting in itself. But then what you were saying, Jeannie, about having to show that you've woken up at the right time, I think that's another way in which people can become burnt out, because everyone's working to different circadian rhythms. Like some people work best in the morning, some people work best in the evening. And with the pandemic, people were more permitted and more able to work to their own schedules, largely speaking, but not everyone. And I think another way in which that's caused burnout in some people is that they've seen some of their colleagues working at 7, 8, 9, 10 in the evening, and they're thinking, oh no, I need to respond to this too. When actually those people may be working from like 6 in the evening till, I don't know, 8 hours worth of work in the evening, just because that's what works with their schedule. Like we need to be able to work synchronously and asynchronously without it damaging other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, the morning person thing, one of my biggest, if not the biggest pet peeves. All those articles, in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to get up at, 4:05 a.m. Like as if that actually makes a difference. Also, there's this thing called the internet that's around the whole globe, and we're almost all working virtually now. And our clients could be in some other time zone, or our team could be in some other time zone. Like what? And different circadian rhythms. I have never been a morning person. I start my day at 11 a.m. Judge me all you want. I have had people look at me funny for that. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not doing so shabby if you look at my track record here. So obviously the key to success is not getting up at 4:05 a.m. And just because it's 4:05 a.m. where I am doesn't mean it's not 4:05. Doesn't mean 11 a.m. isn't 4 a.m. somewhere else. It's just ridiculous. Sorry, I could go on and on about that
no,
one
I love the rant. I love it. It's really finding out how ridiculous some of these standards are. And I think, I mean, we are going to move on how to prevent, we are going to move on to how to prevent this feeling of burnout in a minute. I guess that one of those main things is stop caring about what people are thinking. Keep it to yourself. Make sure that negative feedback is at least neutral, at the very least, if you can try not to be horrible to yourself with that internal language. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant thing for everyone listening, is to stop judging us for waking up at 11. Yeah. Yeah, why don't you just have a go at it yourself?
Exactly.
So I would say, before we quickly move on to a bit more of an in-depth discussion on how to prevent digital marketing burnout, or how we could maybe some brainstorm ideas on this podcast together. I had an interesting thought to ask you guys where you came from in terms of what jobs or academia you were doing before, and how digital marketing burnout is similar or different to the other types of burnout that we've had in our lives. So if people, I'm sort of trying to direct this to those people that be listening, thinking, oh, I'd quite like to know the risks of getting into digital marketing before I go for it, and they might be thinking a bit scared to do it. How does it relate to academia? How does it relate to being at school? The different types of burnout that you felt in other industries, if you have been in any other industries? I'm not sure. Yeah, just pose that question to the team.
Yeah, I'll get started. I think mine is quite straightforward, really. So I was actually working whilst doing my uni studies. So I did have to wake up early just to catch a train to get to work, because I lived outside of London, essentially. And I go to work, finish work, and then go to my evening like lectures essentially, and then get home, do a bit of coursework, and go to sleep. And I do that on the weekends as well. And yeah, I did suffer from burnout doing that, and I could feel it. But I didn't really understand what it was. I didn't know how to sort of deal with it, to handle it. I didn't know what mental health was back in the 10s. So it's like, so for me, it was really challenging to sort of deal with it. And I think, as a result, sometimes, my work quality at work was suffered in certain areas, but then I also obviously recovered from that. The great thing was, obviously, I had a very good support network within my organization that I worked at. And I prospect, they knew what I was doing. They knew what I was trying to achieve. And they all just basically supported me. So I think that was how I managed to sort of overcome that, was to work with people that I could actually trust, and they could support me as well when I needed to be sort of picked up, essentially. So
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's
So
my story.
the importance of community around different types of burnout. I think that can be a lot, the turning point, or the thing that makes digital marketing burnout maybe different, is the isolation that surrounds it. Whereas when we were at uni or at school, there were things where, there were whole systems set up to stop this, or at least to acknowledge it, and say other people have found this too, and here's a safe space. I think we underestimate the importance of a safe space to talk about these feelings. But uni was always a really good place to do that, and school, I suppose. Um, do you guys have any other places that you're coming from different types of work?
For me, in all of this, I keep thinking about my first real job that I kind of grew up in my work world, and it was a long time ago. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but it was only a handful of years after the internet became, really a thing. And so I in this office, I literally had like one hand in each world. Like in my desk in front of me, there was a computer, and some things were computerized, and the company was forward thinking. They actually had a basic HTML website out there on the web, but I would spin my chair around and I'd have like a typewriter and like the green ledger book that you had to write all the invoices in. So it was a very old school environment, but like the internet was like fastly like permeating it. And that's kind of how I made the transition initially, is like they realized like, oh, this girl can figure out how to work on our website and blah, blah, blah. And, so I kind of started doing digital marketing within this incredibly old school environment. But in that environment, it was that butts and seats mentality. Your value was based on how if your butt was in that seat at 8 a.m., which mine never was. It's always 8:05. The morning person thing again. Sorry, I'll get back off of that. Yes. So anyway, but in a way, it was like even though they didn't know what I was doing, they didn't know how to judge my performance, because they didn't know what I was doing. Occasionally there were big milestones I could show them about something I finished on the website or whatever. But I knew that all that was expected of me in that culture is to have my butt in that seat and appear like I'm doing something. So at least I knew what they valued and what that culture valued, and how to quote unquote perform in their eyes. I think that someone going into the digital marketing world now is most likely working virtually. And so this really applies to anyone who works virtually. That sense of, I couldn't imagine like coming in as a new, worker who hasn't really had a full-time job, and just like trying to get acquainted with your boss or bosses and trying to figure out what they expect, what the culture expects of you, even what your coworkers expect of you. It's that like culture, how can culture exist virtually is a whole other discussion, but that keeps coming to mind here, because I feel like that adds another layer to the negative self-talk that we already give ourselves. We're already hard enough on ourselves. And then we're like, oh my God, what does my boss expect of me? And, and you're kind of all imagining it when it's not in your face, like in a physical office. So anyway, culture comes to mind, and trying to figure it out, and the additional pressure from that.
Yeah. And you use the word how to perform. I love the way you said it was like, I know how to perform. That's exactly how I felt in my first job. I was like, oh, okay, so we're not really doing any work, we're just pretending, and that's all I kind of have to do. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but at least the guilt is not really on me because I can see everyone else doing the same thing. Whereas in my role now, I if I don't work, I'm only creating more work for myself. I think is the difference. Is just I need to do it eventually. No one's going to come in and say, "Oh, don't worry, Genie, you hit the target. You performed really well. You fit into the culture. I just have to no, I have to get this out, or else it will. Nobody else is coming to save me." And I think that's also part of that burnout feeling. Like you said, just if you don't have to assimilate to a culture, then really you're creating the culture yourself. And if you create a bad one, then it's that's not great. Yeah, Caspian, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to follow on from something that Pam just mentioned around culture and how to work together in remote companies. And I've seen increasingly organizations saying how they're asking team members to write kind of guides to working with me. So everyone in the company all writes like, this is how I work, this is how I think, this is how I'll react if you say something in this way to me. Like, I may be forgetful, but please give me a nudge. I won't be offended, or please don't chase me. I know I've got something to do, but I'm just working on it. And everyone responds differently in different ways. And I think there's so much nuance in how people communicate remotely that you can't infer through a Slack message that if you were kind of sat opposite someone, it's way easier to just be like, "You're right. Have you done? Oh no, okay, I'll leave you to it. It's
Mm,
fine." Um,
mm.
yeah, so these kind of guides to working with each other, I think, is feeding into company culture more, which can potentially help reduce the possibility of burnout. Maybe, I don't know. Um,
Yeah, it could. I mean, I
yeah, I thought that
suppose
was
it
quite
could go
interesting.
either way, couldn't it? That sort of write down every bit of nuance about your own behavior. On the one hand, I can see how that's definitely useful. On the other hand, that stresses me out. I don't know how I'm gonna react to to you messaging me on one day with an email, that's a bit too direct. You never know these things. And then it's like, why do I have to write out every single facet of my personality? So I can see that either being something that exists just for show of a company, or something that, if you did it right, probably makes something makes quite I don't know, make what do you guys think about it? So do you think it's a useful thing to do, or no?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's all sorts of things like out there, like 16 personalities and like Myers-Briggs test that I've done
Mm.
with teams that I've worked with. I think there's another one. I think it's a Geithner one. I think it's quite interesting. It's more around working on your strengths. So basically, you communicate like what your strengths are. Here's the thing: majority of the time, as you said, Jenny, you don't really know what type of person you actually are. um, Most of the time. So for instance, until you're in that like heat of the moment, really, um, you know, then you know what type of person you are. And I think like with some of those tests, that although they're not really scientific in any kind of way, but they try to say they are, what they try to do is just stress you so you can find out how you'd react. Because say if you are writing like a profile, you're not really in a stress environment. It's more the whole idea of how you see yourself at that point in time. I hope that makes sense. So so
No,
so,
it
so
does.
what I so what I think of these things is more it's a challenging one, really, whether your team wants to perform like a Myers-Briggs test or anything like that. So you know who you are. And what we did with a previous agency was you didn't have to share that with your team. You just knew what your strengths are when you are pushed or when you are in a stressed environment, so you know how you can react to things. So I think a lot of the time it's more around, I'm not saying go get a therapist, but it's more around understanding yourself and how you react to certain things. And if you feel like you want to share it, you can. But if you don't, then at least you know, if someone is being direct to you, why do you take it the way that you do?
Mm.
um, so that's important, I think.
Yeah, it's so stressful that every time you wake up and you go to work, you have to also say, "Oh my gosh, everything that I reply to, there's a paper trail there. If someone doesn't like it, they can pick it up and they can use it and say this." I definitely think that that adds to the feeling of burnout because you're constantly not only being watched like you would be in an office, you're being recorded. You're being everything you write is an email or something that you can be referred back to, which almost feels unnatural. I mean, if it's natural to us because we've been doing it, for years and years and years. But if we actually genuinely go back and think of how humans want to exist, it's quite exhausting to be watched all the time. And I think a life on the internet um, is that's kind of what you get if you do that, which I do think definitely can create burnout. Um, yeah, it's like living in a glass house. um, Pam, do you have a
Big Brother is watching. It's
yeah,
the modern day
exactly.
version of that. And yeah, I mean, oh my God, I haven't really thought about it from that aspect of, everything you do and say is recorded. But one thing I do think about a lot, because I work with some teams in other countries and culture is different there, and they're much more straightforward. Here in the US, and especially in the digital marketing industry, we're expected to add so much, I call it fluff, to
Mm,
everything. You can't write an email without being like, you can't write an email and say, here's your report. It has to be, hi, so and so. I hope you're doing well. How were your holidays? And blah, 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 blah. And I thought you might like to see this report now that it's finished. And all the exclamation
mm.
point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Like, I'm like, did I add enough exclamation points to this email to make it sound like I'm excited and friendly? Like, versus when I deal with those other teams, I could be straightforward and just be like, here it is. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay,
Yep,
bye. Yeah.
I
It's
absolutely resonate with
exhausting.
that.
It's
And
totally exhausting.
it is a real. I mean, obviously culture is real, but the idea of a professional international workplace culture. I've seen so many studies on it of how to tackle it, and people saying, "Oh, but if you're German, you'll want to talk like this, or if you do French, you have to talk in this way." And if everybody doesn't assimilate, then there's going to be some sort of backlash because one person is going to be more direct than the other, and it's that directness that I think that also plays into gender. We have to perform our gender roles and these things where it's just, oh my gosh, and no wonder we're all burnt out. It's so overwhelming to be constantly having to think about that because that's otherwise right now when you just talk, you're not really thinking about it. You just say how you and then if you're actually writing an email, you're constantly criticizing yourself like, oh God, I have to write this and I have to do these exclamation marks or else everyone's going to think I'm the worst person in the world. But yeah, no, I absolutely resonate with that. That is just the most annoying part of my day is self-censoring myself. And it plays into that role of, it's just an additional identity that I have to take on. So there's Twitter, there's LinkedIn, there's email, there's Facebook, there's all of this. And now, yeah. um,
Not to
Caspian?
mention email in and of it. Sorry, just one
No,
last
no,
thought
go
of
ahead.
that. Not to mention, email in and of itself, the quantity of it's like a fire hydrant to the face. And dealing with that all day, every day that is a whole thing in and of itself.
I know. It's such a weird one as well because like you just said, email in itself, whereas if you go onto Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, you've created those personalities, those identities. On email, you have to remember which personality you created with that specific person at the very beginning of your relationship and uphold it. There's some emails I'll send which are just thanks a lot, LOL. love you, bye. And that's great. And there's some where I really have to say, okay, we've started this very professional relationship, and now let's continue this because this is how we perform this relationship. And you're entirely right when you say email is a whole world of that in its own, because you have to remember that. No, there isn't a little thing saying, oh, by the way, you're professional with this person. You have to go back and see. It's insane to think of it like that. Do you guys have any thoughts or
I was just thinking as Pam and you were talking, Ginny, some advice that someone once gave me was, well, not just me, but to the room he was speaking to, they said, always assume positive intent. Like, regardless of what someone said, people may vary how much fluff they put in their emails from time to time because maybe they're emailing on the move, or maybe they've had a stressful morning, and so maybe when normally they would say, how are you doing, I hope you're having a lovely day, and then here's your report, if they just do say, here's your report, rather than taking offense to that, it's like, oh, well, they're probably just busy. And like, it's easy to get wrapped up in um, adding interpretation to emails or messages if, I don't know, if you're in some form of burnout, I think, or if you're stressed yourself, you could easily be like, oh no, well, what have I done? Like, what's going wrong, or is there a problem? But yeah, always assume positive intent, I reckon, is good advice.
I think that's actually some of the best advice I've ever heard, because it takes it over for every type of burnout is, or every type of relationship you have. If you assume positive intent, that's that's actually quite a powerful way to prevent this, because the thing that I'm seeing, the pattern that I'm seeing as we're talking about this, is that we're doing it to ourselves and everyone's doing it to themselves, so it's creating this horrible culture. So if we're all assuming positive intent, that's actually a powerful move that you could make in your career to make yourself happier, I think. That's really nice. Thanks, Caspian.
That's really good. Thanks, Caspian.
So I was just wondering, here's an interesting one. Even if we do, what's your take on the statement, burnout is inevitable? Is that something, are we on a one track way to burnout? Is there, is that when we put our, is that our endpoint and we have to do that? Or is there, you know, is it, can we avoid it is basically what I'm trying to say.
I definitely think we can avoid it. I don't think it's inevitable because otherwise everyone would be constantly burning out one after the other or all at the same time, and everything would grind to a halt if everyone was burning out. It might be that we kind of do burn out in sequence, one person at
We're
a
just
time,
really
but
lucky with it.
with the timing, yeah, we just time it really well. But I think for some people, setting boundaries is easier than others, and for some people, it's easier to get caught up in thinking, oh, I must do X or I must do Y and I must do it by this time, or I can't finish until I've done this. And then you just think that hours is the right answer when actually, if you get stuck in that rut or the way of thinking where it's just, oh, I just need to, or I'm going to spend this many more hours until I've done this thing, so often
Mm,
you can get away from that by just going for a walk or taking 30 minutes and then being like, oh, actually,
yeah.
it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or it's not as important as to sacrifice everything else I've got going on in my life right now to finish that thing and take probably 5 more hours than it would have done if I took a break.
Yeah.
So sorry, that's changing the answer a bit to the question, but I don't think it's inevitable. I think if people set boundaries, or reset boundaries, then it can be avoided.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's the ability to reset boundaries as well, because boundaries are important in every walk of life. But nobody really talks about when your boundaries change and when you experience things or you just grow a bit and you think, well, I don't actually need to do this anymore, or I don't enjoy this part of my job that I know other people they're not relying on me for it. So we can put these extra boundaries in place. I think that's a really good point. Does anybody else have some nifty tricks or some interesting thoughts on it being inevitable?
I think that's true. You're not going to get fired for setting your boundaries, for
No.
communicating them as well to people. You know, yeah, I think that's what I can add to that. Really, is you just have to communicate what your boundaries are. If you have to, work at 11, you communicate that to people, right? I think that's it. Really, just communicating what your boundaries are. And I think a lot of us we kind of shy away from doing that. I mean, I'm guilty of it a lot. I don't really communicate my boundaries, and then sometimes when I stepped on, sometimes, and I really get frustrated or angry, but I'm not frustrated at the person, more frustrated, as you said, at myself. But if I communicated those boundaries and they were quite clear to those I work with, I think a lot of those issues that I have in my head, or the issues that we have, would be avoided in the future. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's hard to do though, but being able to communicate your boundaries is a clear one.
Yeah, I suppose also that relates back to Caspian's point of some companies putting in a measure to actually critically think about your boundaries, whether they're correct or not at the time. That, I guess, that's a different. It's just the act of getting people to actively think of their boundaries is probably a good thing. Um, I've been won back round to the idea after this. It's gone from stressing me out to actually maybe thinking maybe a workplace personality quiz is not such a bad idea. I don't know. Pam, can I give you some space to talk?
If I try to think about burnout as like an emotion, in that sense, I
Mm,
would say it's inevitable that you're going to feel it at times, just like any other emotion. I mean, it can have physical ramifications, but so can other negative emotions. You know, sadness, depression, anxiety; those can have physical ramifications too. So sometimes I kind of think of it like an emotion, and in that sense, yeah, it's going to be inevitable that you're going to encounter it. And then it's all about, how you handle it. Everything in life is balance, right? If we let ourselves be sad all the time, that would be incredibly bad. If we let ourselves be at our most wound up, positive, energetic state all the time, that would be bad too. It's all about coming back to center. And so I think if you think of burnout as an emotion that you're inevitably going to encounter, then it's just all about how you handle it, and boundaries. Oh my God, that's a huge, huge aspect of how to handle many things in life, but this is in particular. And just kind of, trying to ground yourself and know that this is temporary. This feeling of overwhelm isn't going to last forever. I can just, just keep, putting one foot in front of the other, taking the next step to get through this overwhelm and come back to center, which, I'm kind of reminding myself as I talk about the importance of meditation. For me, I actually have gotten away from it recently. I need to get back to it, because even just taking 5-10 minutes at the end of every day to just be quiet with yourself and come back to center, it was magical. And studies say that,
mm.
like, it actually rewires your brain, not completely, but it actually has an impact on your gray matter and the chemicals in it, and how you feel on the regular if you practice that coming back to center. So that's, if I do think it's inevitable in a sense, if you think of it in that light, that it's an emotion of sorts. But it's just like, in that regard, then it's just like anything else in life. It's gonna life. One of my favorite quotes is, and I can never quote it exactly, but it's something to the effect of, life is awesome, and then it's terrible, and then it's awesome again. And in between, there's some, routine, mundane stuff, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be terrible. And then it's going to be awesome again. So yeah, you're going to get burnt out, and then you're going to have to figure out how to navigate your way back to center. And, just that's this kind of cycle of life, right?
That's life. Yeah. And I think that's um kind of wise words to sort of start ending on, really, because I think we wouldn't be here doing a podcast on digital marketing burnout if it wasn't extremely common. And I guess people should take away from this, what I'm going to be taking away from this, from all of your amazing comments, is it's a really personal thing. It's something that um, uh, you know, the best thing you can do is recognize it, and how you want to deal with that is kind of your own way. If you know you need to get a personality test and tell people really specifically what your boundaries are, if you need to meditate, if you need to take some time away, if this is a 4-day work week, these kinds of things are becoming so much more common. And I guess what I'm taking away from this is you guys have given me permission to think about them a bit more freely and not feel so guilty. Is that word that we started off with is just guilt. It's that horrible thing. Um, but it will get better, as Pam said, and we've all gone there, and we're all going to be there again, unfortunately, because we work hard and we hold ourselves to some standards that, um, unfortunately, we can't actually control. Is what I'm trying to think of. Is we can try, but you really need to put effort into it, which is really difficult. Um, do you guys have any quick sort of uh, your words of wisdom or anything you'd really like to end this podcast on?
I love what you just said about, these things are here, the 4-day work week or whatever it may be, this still digital culture, how to work with me guides, like it's here. And, an alternative work life or work style, whatever you need to do to keep yourself mentally healthy is okay. It's okay. I constantly have to say that to myself these days. It's like, I'm not working an 8 to 5. I still feel the guilt after all these years of 12 years. I've had my own company. I've been out of that physical office culture, but I still feel it. I just have to constantly tell myself it's okay. And my other two favorite words are for now. If something feels incredibly overwhelming, whatever situation I'm dealing with, I just remind myself this is just for now. So I would say, it's okay. And for now is kind of a mantra that I use, along with, it's funny, we just got a comment asking about any recommended books, along with this book that I keep my favorite page bookmarked. This is Rework by the guys that created it from 37 Signals that created Basecamp. My favorite page in here that I keep within reach at all times, I don't know how well you can see this, but it says, "You're better off with a kick-ass half than a half-ass whole." I also chant that to myself because one thing we didn't really touch upon, but for me, one aspect of my mental health struggles is perfectionism. I will torture myself with perfectionism. So that's another mantra I physically keep within reach of my desk.
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. See?
Yeah, that's really brilliant, and I do agree, Pam. I think it's a lot of times it's more about us telling ourselves, it's okay. There's a lot of help out there. I think a lot of businesses are actually a lot more forward thinking than they were, say, in the early 2000s or 2010s as well. So, we have like some people are implementing 4-day work weeks, but I think a lot of the times, as someone who's worked within some companies, organizations, is not actually utilizing those. Because if you're a highly conscientious person, for a lot of people who work in the digital space you think, maybe I shouldn't be taking that mental health day. Maybe I should be, completing this piece of work that I should be doing, or that not been aware that there are, sort of helplines that you could use or utilize. That you could essentially, it's okay to go for a walk after a call, after a meeting. It's okay to go to the gym during lunchtime, or do something that's creative. You could decide to play or learn to play a musical instrument. I think for me, one of the things that I try to do a lot is to I understand a lot more about my journey. So right now I'm actually looking at the book called The Hero's Journey. And it's a book basically written by, I'd say, by one of the forefathers of like story creation, and it's Joseph Campbell. And if you think of your life as a series of journeys that you go through, and sort of coming back to that rebirth kind of stage, I think, if you look at the things right now that you go through, and sort of put yourself within that journey and understand that whatever you're going through right now is, as Pam said, is very temporary, and you will come out at the other end having learned something new about yourself. And I think that's always something you can look back on and say, without that experience, to be quite honest, you wouldn't be where you are right now.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Si. Thank you so much. Caspian?
I really liked what Pam said about burnout being like an emotion, because I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. And I think everyone will have a different threshold and tolerance to that emotion. So, what's burnout or capacity for one person will be different for another, and being mindful of that in yourself. Like, try not to compare yourselves to one another. That's another way to go down the spiral of burnout, I think. Um, Everyone's situations are unique, and one thing that I used to find absurd was seeing people who blocked out lunch in their calendar every day, and I was like, "What on earth? Like, why do they need to do that?" But actually, they're just protecting their time,
Yeah,
and you can do that and have the flexibility to change it. It's better to not get caught up by diary snatchers who are going to go in and get any minute of the day you have. But I think being selfish in a way that doesn't hurt others is a good thing. Think about yourself, block out the time that you need, and you can always be flexible with it once it's there. But it stopped. It means it's your decision, which I think
yeah.
is a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'll just quickly do a shout out to the two comments. So we just had Samir said that Deep Work by C.A. Newport is also a good book, and Finding Flow. Dixon has said that. Just if anybody's listening and needed to know, those are two other recommendations from the podcast. So I'm just going to quickly bring in David, who's going to tell us about next week. But just before, I want to say thank you so much. It was a really special podcast and really helpful for me personally. So thank you very much, guys.
Absolutely great discussion, everyone, and perhaps it even actually warrants a part 2 to occur at some point in the future. Stay
Absolutely.
tuned. We will see. So that was episode 31 of the Knowledge Panel Show. Episode 32 is going to be coming up next month. And on that particular show, we're going to be covering the topic, what creative content works best for SEO in 2023. So to find out more about that, we already have one guest signing up for that. That's Iona Townsley from Neomam Studios. But sign up at theknowledgepanelshow.com for that show, for future shows as well, and we'll send an alert before we go live to make sure hopefully you can join us live and you can ask questions next time around.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Thanks to everyone who came on the podcast. And I really hope that this part 2 happens, because I think we have so much more to talk about. But yeah, so have a good rest of the day, guys. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.